Welcome back to the Mike Method, where we explore the habits, mindsets, and methods behind exceptional leadership. Today's guest is Justin McSharry, currently driving leadership and organizational development at GM, and formerly the head of leadership development at Dropbox. At Dropbox, Justin helped pioneer an AI-first cultural shift by scaling coaching and embedding leadership as a core capability across the business. At GM, he's tackling the challenge of reinvention in a century-old company, navigating the shift from industrial internal combustion to electric innovation. This episode dives deep into the evolution of change leadership and why it's no longer a one-time project, but a permanent state. We talk about the shift from managing change to navigating complexity, why experimentation beats control when the pace of change is relentless, what GM is learning as it reinvents itself in the EV era, and how Justin's team at Dropbox discovered the secret to fast execution. Start with trust, build cross-functional teams early, and design for iteration, not perfection. Whether you're leading a legacy organization or scaling a fast-moving startup, this episode will challenge how you think about change and leave you with practical ways to develop more agile and resilient teams. Let's dive in. Hey, Justin, I really appreciate you making time to be on the podcast today.
Sure, Mike. Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, I think change management has always been one of those topics that's on the leadership development roadmap, right? When you're developing leaders, they need to learn change skills. Some use the ProSci model, but it's always been there. It's all been part of it. And I think what's interesting is there's been this shift from change management being something you go learn about and then you go do when there's like a big project or a restructure or something like that, to a space where change is, it feels like with AI and just in general, change is accelerating and it's no longer like an episode or a program. It's just like always there. And I'm curious what you're seeing as you're thinking about how leaders need to embrace change, not just at GM, but just in general, what your experience has been and where your head is at around change right now.
Yeah, change leadership, I would say, has become more of it's almost like a capability rather than we're going to follow a change model, which is still out there for sure. There's change models, that the 5 stages of change, and there's different stage models that are helpful to think about the sort of process of it. But at GM and just generally when I think about leadership, it's building the capability of being able to navigate the uncertainty in the space. We hear VUCA a lot. There's also BANI is a newer one, BANI, in terms of just framing up the complex world that we find ourselves in. So one of the ways that I think about it is building a capability around understanding change, how it is a process, not an event.
Right.
And getting people to think about the types of complexity versus simplicity. So the Cynefin model is one that we've used to frame up how to think about the difference between, like, let's say, something that's complicated and something that's complex. Like an engine in your car, right? You think about all the different pieces and parts of an engine. Kind of looks complex, but actually it's complicated because there's just very predictable inputs and outputs. The weather, right, or just our day-to-day lives of being a human are more complex because there are a lot of unknowable unknowns that we can encounter from day to day. One of the ways that I teach leaders to navigate is to think about the process of experimentation and iteration. So the program or product managers know this as just what they do for a living. It's a product development process, right? You start with a minimum viable product, then you get feedback on it and you iterate. And we can apply that to pretty much anything that we do. You don't have to be a product manager. You can think about experimenting, trying new things, testing it, getting feedback, and what's working, what's not working, what's getting the results. So that's one way we frame it. Another way we've framed it, we've engaged with the Coder folks. So the Coder is one of the kind of titans, if you will, in the change management space.
Absolutely.
They've updated quite a bit of their material. They used to be kind of more of a stage model company, and they've got some new science behind it. And one of them, the models that's been popular is survive, thrive. So framing it in terms of, am I in survive mode, am I reactive to the change that's happening, or am I in thrive mode and proactive, and you're leveraging creativity during times of change.
For all the listeners out there, I know in the last 5 minutes, we've probably talked about 5 different or 6 different change models. So Katie's going to actually pop the links to all of those models down so that if you're frantically trying to Google search right now, like I haven't heard of this acronym or that acronym, don't worry about it. They're all listed below. You just click on the links and and you can learn more about these various models. Yeah, I think I love that you're moving into experimentation, because I think it feels like change feels like a dirty word, right? Like it feels like this, like, oh God, here we go again, right? Like change is happening. Oh, I've got to go through change, right? And most people, interestingly, don't mind change. They just don't want to be changed. And in a lot of the cases, when, from a business perspective, we lose that illusion of control that we have, because like somebody is enforcing this change or putting this change out, and I don't really have any control over it. And so I can get to a place, I think, of feeling like a victim of change. Yeah. And what I love about the word experimentation is that opens it up to like experiment feels like creativity. It feels like innovation. It feels like we get to go try cool new things. And we're not super worried about whether we fail, because we're going to fail a little bit. We're going to iterate and move on. Whereas change doesn't feel that way to me. It just has this like icky feeling of like, this has been foisted upon me and I have to deal with this thing now.
Yeah. Well, I think some of that comes, in fairness, from companies that probably don't do organizational change very well.
Right.
I've been at companies like that are sort of reorging every year and have some rationale for it, but it's often they're not taking into account the second order effects of it, that you're taking somebody off of a project, putting them on a new team, and suddenly they're supposed to just execute on day one, and there's a whole human element of, no, we've actually got to reform the team, right, build some relationships, and then that's going to take a few months before we can actually be productive. But the other side of it is that I feel like a lot of executives I've talked to say we need more agile leaders, we need more nimble, adaptable leaders, and I think what they're responding to is just this pace of change that companies are faced with in the marketplace lately, that does require that experimentation mindset, the ability to not act like a victim when it is happening, and it's not like anybody's fault. It's just like, this is the world we're in now.
And interestingly, the measurement for that adaptability, like as we've talked about emotional intelligence, EQ, there's now AQ, which is a leader's adaptability quotient. So how flexible and open are they to a changing environment and changing circumstances, whether or not that is within their level of control.
Yeah. Yeah, that is really interesting. And there is an emotional and a resilience aspect of it, where you've got to be able to almost step away from the keyboard, step away from the desk, and go take a walk and metabolize a little bit of what's going on, because it is, humans are creatures of wanting certainty to feel safe, effectively. So to whatever somebody needs to do to get themselves sort of reoriented to the new realities, and then the executives in a company need to be very clear and transparent and communicate well, the why behind change and all the other things that we know are good practices to do their part of it.
I think what's interesting is that there's a point of change, right? Like it doesn't matter what model you follow. The reality is there's a change that's happened. I'm aware of the change now. Then there's this period of time where I feel stressed out about the change. And some of the models call that the valley of despair. And so I'm in this place where I'm like, I didn't want this. Now it's happening for whatever reason. I don't know how I feel about this. Somehow I'm supposed to deal with this. And then there's a point of acceptance, which is like, okay, I accept that this is happening now. And now I have to think about, how do I need to shift and how do I need to be as a leader in this new environment? The more that we can shorten the time between the changes happen and accepting it, the lower the stress level is for us as a leader, right? Because we're just not spending time in that kind of valley of despair. And I think that adaptable leaders, what they're seeing is, or what they have the ability to do, is to say, okay, a change has happened. I recognize that this is different. I'm going to have some feelings about this, good, bad, and ugly. I need to think this through, and I need to be able to talk to my team through this so they can understand how this is impacting us as a team, but also impacting us as an organization, and what the personal side of this is. And I need to listen to them to get super clear on how they're feeling about this change. But as soon as we get to acceptance, now we have a place where we can actually take action. That's kind of the next step, right? Like I can take tangible actions that are in line with this new change that I may or may not have had any sense of control over.
That's right. Yeah, that's a really good sort of walk through the different stages. Yeah, minimizing that time can be really powerful. I think the good change leaders are able to your point, metabolize the change, get behind the why and the acceptance of it. Think about, okay, what about this new paradigm
Mhm.
am I still bought into,
Right.
make sure like maybe I actually don't buy into it and I need to leave, and that's okay. Once I'm there, I've got to bring my team along. And there's also some good practices around when you're rolling out a change. Let's say you're one of the leaders that's actually executing a change. You can bring certain groups into the fold as soon as possible to,
Yeah.
the more senior leaders and then the managers, just to get them into that process so that they can lead the teams as well, because they've got to have gone through that process themselves. So there's some good things I've seen there. Often it's just like, look, this is happening, and
Yeah.
and being very clear so that anybody that might be sort of still in denial about it can maybe hopefully quickly get out of that place. My experience, a lot of depending on the company you're in, I think people are more, I don't know, embracing of it or just used to it these days,
Yeah.
just because of the sheer amount of change that's happening, I think, in the world, and not just politically, let's say, but just even in companies that are needing to adapt to the marketplace changes.
Right.
So I have seen some of that.
Yeah. I think that the fascinating thing for me is that, when I think about communication around change, sometimes you can't communicate, right? Like, say it's an organizational restructure, there may be some layoffs involved. It's going to change people's titles, positions, whatever. It's hard. You can't pre-communicate that. Like, you can't give them warning around that because that just sends everybody into a tailspin. In the times when you can give people advance warning to say, hey, a change is going to occur. It's going to happen in 3 months or 6 months or whatever. The reality is that people will understand the change and be able to go through that change curve more rapidly because the change hasn't happened yet. So the feeling of the thing occurring is not quite there yet, but I'm aware of it. So then when the actual change occurs, I've had lots of time to kind of rationalize, get my head wrapped around it. And I know that's not always possible, right? There's just like a lot of times when you can't. But from a leadership perspective, the earlier you can let people know, to give them warning, to just go through the process they need to go through. Denial, as you say, is part of that process. The better off the change is going to be and the less dramatic it will feel for people.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the advance notice, just a sense of, if you're also communicating on a regular basis about the status of the company, people know like how things are
Yeah.
going and will maybe even have lots of opinions on what needs to change
Right.
already. And so they're gonna be kind of like, okay, you had me at hello, let's go. And I think your top performers are typically the folks that are on that curve. But then there are the companies that I think have done things a long way for a long,
Mhm.
or sorry, have done things a certain way for a long time. And
Right.
that's, I would say, the culture at General Motors, where, we've been producing vehicles a certain way for a long time because we're really good at it. And it's
Yeah.
been typically, for example, an ICE, what we call ICE, internal combustion engine vehicle. Now we're actually introducing electric vehicles that have battery packs and are, produced in a different way. We're taking the opportunity to add new features. We're integrating software like we never have before. So there are really interesting things, autonomous vehicle technology, self-driving. So it's put upon us new paradigms that we need to move and change into. That for a behemoth company that's operated in a certain way is a big opportunity,
Hmm.
and not something that's going to happen overnight by any stretch. But
And
yeah.
you're building some really cool vehicles too. Like, I think you drive a Cadillac Lyric, right?
Yeah, I actually had a Lyric, and they asked
Yeah.
me to trade it in because they've got to get it on the secondary market before
Okay.
too long,
Okay.
before it racks up too many kilometers. But it's I'm in a Cadillac Optic now, which is
Oh yeah.
the crossover, like
Yeah.
slightly
Yeah.
smaller. Yeah, Cadillac's just got a kind of a stunning new lineup of EVs that have been quite impressive.
Well, I
So
know
it's
you
been
got a
fun
chance to look at the
to
Hummer
experience it.
too, right? Like, you were
Yeah,
looking at
the
the
Hummer EV.
electric Hummer, which is a impressive vehicle.
Oh, it's like a cognitive dissonance because you're in this giant vehicle that seems like it should be gas powered, and of course they
Yeah.
have gas powered Hummers, but
Yeah.
it's one of the earliest EVs that GM put out, and it's a fun, vehicle to drive. It's smooth. It's just too wide for these narrow Vancouver roads, so
Yeah.
I opted out of the Hummer EV, but it is a my kids love the test drive. I'll tell you that. But yeah, it's just a really exciting new lineup. But then when you think about going against Tesla in the EV space and other companies, Hyundai's doing great work there. It's
Yeah.
a competitive environment, and so the ability to be nimble and act quickly and be agile and that experiment type thinking the cross-functional kind of collaboration that's required now more than ever is really, putting new challenges in front of us.
It's interesting to see the change management curve that the world has been on moving from ICE to electric, right? Like there was a lot of denial, there was a lot of resistance, there was a lot of pushback. And now it's kind of like all the manufacturers are like their electric plan is super clear. Even the super high-end sports car market has moved to a hybrid model. Some of them have moved to an electric model. Like it's clear where this technology is going, right? It's kind of like, but we haven't had a transition like that since I think we went from horse and buggies to literally to the first ICE engines in the Model T Ford. It's been a long time, right? Like, a decade or 100+ years of being this ICE place. And now it looks like we're very rapidly moving into this electric world. And it's happening so fast relative to the transitions that have happened in this industry. And there just hasn't been an industry transition like this, really. When you look at the auto industry, not much has changed, right? Like they've fundamentally been the same product for 125 years.
Yeah, no, it's very true. I think that there's also this giant infrastructure of charging that has to be put in place, but we're starting to see a lot of that built out. And Tesla, to their credit, right, came out ahead and proved out a lot of it. And now I think a lot of companies are actually saw that and went, "Wow, that's very possible," and there's a market. And GM, we've got a mission of zero crashes, zero congestion, zero emissions, which is an inspiring mission that puts together the pieces on safety, zero crashes, zero congestion around autonomous vehicles and other aspects, and zero congestion or zero emissions around the EVs. So, we're able to put a dent in the environmental piece of it while also producing just amazing cars. The new fleet are all from top to bottom sort of redesigned, and they're fun to drive and they're fast. And so a lot of people that I know are choosing EVs because it's just a better vehicle from top to bottom. But yeah, the charging piece is tricky for some, and that's coming along. But yeah, it is an exciting time, without a doubt.
The new Escalade, electric Escalade, is gorgeous. It's like
the IQ.
So beautiful. The IQ, yeah.
I look at that thing. I just pull up videos of it because that might be as close as I ever get to one. I don't know. It's not a cheap vehicle, but it is really stunning. Yeah. I agree. And they've got the Celestiq, which is even higher end. It's like a sedan. It's long. It's like they're really kind of going after the Bentley, Rolls-Royce market.
Okay. Yeah.
And so you go hand pick your finishes, and they're kind of made to order essentially.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely beautiful vehicle. So it's been exciting to see Cadillac come out, because I couldn't have told you Cadillac models aside from the Escalade prior to this. They just weren't that sort of visible, but
no.
It is exciting to go out and sort of hopefully be redefining the experience of transportation and owning a vehicle, and the excitement of, having this car that gets you around where you need to go.
I'm going to shift gears on us, and I'm using that term intentionally after we talked about the car industry, to drop back to your time at Dropbox, because I have quoted you, I don't know how many times, on the work that you and one of your compatriots did at Dropbox, where you took a look at the difference in projects that were successful and were fast to implement at Dropbox. And you wanted to figure out what was different between the teams that could execute. And I can't remember if the difference was like one team could execute it, set of teams could execute it in 6 months, and the other could do it in like 90 days. Or I forget the math, and I'm sure you'll share that with us. But you figured out that there was something that those leaders and those teams that were doing that was incredibly unique, and you needed to replicate that across Dropbox. I would love for you to share that story with the listeners.
I think you're talking about either the piece that was a team effectiveness assessment, or there was a project we did around moving faster, where we studied teams that were moving faster with
that work. I'd love, because that is it's such cool work. And I've quoted you a number of times. I'd love for you to share what you've learned through that moving faster work.
Yeah, we interviewed several teams. So there was an initiative called Moving Faster. It was within our core product organization. It was just uncovering the amount of kind of bog and like what's preventing teams from executing on, whether it was new products, code releases, et cetera. And so we attempted to sort of codify what were the top teams doing, what were their behaviors and actions. And one of the things that they did really well was just built relationships. I mean, it's funny how a lot of this stuff comes down to, dribbling and free throws, to use a basketball analogy. Relationships are the foundation of obviously human connection. And just at the end of the day, these are groups of human beings that have to get work done. And so you got to have, I remember talking to a leader who was struggling, and she said the team was struggling to execute.
Yeah.
And she said, I just wish we would have spent a little bit of time up front. This is a getting to know each other. This is a product team, so the way that they're formulated is you've got a product manager,
Yeah.
a lead engineer,
Yeah.
and a designer, like a
Okay.
UX designer, right? And then they've got all their teams, and so that's kind of the nucleus. And they were just having interpersonal conflict that was just bogging the work down tremendously. So that's the one thing that they do is they right up front get into good relations, and that's through whether you're even doing team building, you're doing the Enneagram together, right, to understand your
Yeah.
personality styles and how it affects your work styles, et cetera. The other thing that people were doing was setting up asynchronous communication. So rather than we're just going to be discussing during meetings, once you have that relational footprint, you can actually make decisions pretty quickly over Slack or Teams or whatever chat medium you're using. You can kind of discuss and debate a little bit asynchronously every day. So that was like kind of a game changer because just think about if you don't have a relationship with somebody, you're not going to be able to get into that over chat. You've got to
No.
go in person, right, or
Yeah.
virtually. So that's another thing that unlocked for them. What else did we learn? There are aspects of just going back to experimentation and iteration. I find, and this can be applied not only to software products, but to, my own learning and development products and anything. It's just getting to a minimum viable product more quickly.
Okay.
A lot of times people go, well, we need to do a needs analysis or some customer interaction and get some feedback on what's needed. We're going to do some surveying, et cetera, focus groups. We're going to put all that together. Then we're going to go build for 3 months or
Right.
6 months or however long it's going to take us. And then we're going to launch something and then we're going to get feedback. And if you think about that entire cycle, it's you're taking things change, first of all, between the time you did surveying and 6 months later.
Yeah.
So you need a rapid iteration cycle. That's what a lot of them are doing. Okay, we'll get some initial feedback. We'll form a base case. We'll create an MVP in like 3 weeks.
Okay, that's
Right?
fast.
And then we'll launch something, and then we'll just get some quick feedback on it. We'll take a subset of customers, right, and just get some quick reactions. Are we headed in the right direction? Yes. Okay, let's go through another. And a lot of them were using Agile, which is common in software development, so 2-week sprints and doing more rapid feedback cycling. The groups, the nucleuses that weren't doing that were just kind of developing for a long time, and then finding that they were kind of off course 3 months later, and that just leads to a lot of delays. So that was another aspect, but yeah, those were a few things that we noticed.
The other one that you shared with me, which I thought was great, was, and you gave me an example of the teams that weren't able to move fast. A director would come up with an idea, opportunity, challenge, and then they would start talking to their managers and their team to try to figure out how they were going to go tackle it. And then they would get partway through it and then start to talk to the other directors about it. And they're like, no, there's all these other things you need to know about. This affects my team as well. So all of a sudden they get bogged down in discussion, thinking they'd made all this progress, but they hadn't involved the other people in the organization who were necessary for them to be successful. And you shared that the teams where 2 or 3 directors got together first and talked about the proper opportunity and said, okay, this affects all of us. Let's figure this out. And then each of them brought 2 lieutenants with them to the meeting. So now there was 3 directors and maybe 6 people that were at the manager level. And that became the cross-functional team.
Yeah.
That one of the learnings was when they started with that model, all of the roadblocks kind of went away because they had everybody in the room that could make the decision. And the directors that thought peer first, team second, whereas the directors that thought team first, that slowed the entire progress chain down.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I can think of specific examples where those directors that had gotten together were from 2 different functional groups that had to work together. And each of those groups, those organizations actually had different incentive structures. So one group, which was really tricky, right? Because one group would have, let's say, reliability and safety as kind of main incentivization structures. And then the other group would have making money, basically, right? Producing products that were kind of our core product and monetizing, et cetera. And so speed was really important. Reliability and, safety were less important, but the product groups that were launching products had to sit on top of that software platform that this other group was incentivized to keep reliable, right? So you had to really get those groups together to talk about, let's take an enterprise mindset at the end of the day, right? We don't want to break the system and make it unreliable, but we don't want to slow down and lose out on opportunities for revenue. So let's just decide, what are the pressure tests where we can set up some boundaries around this. And so again, getting together with those groups and creating ongoing conversations was absolutely critical. Otherwise, if you didn't, you were toast, right? Because you would end up in a situation where, oh, I didn't realize you needed, to run new tests on the system next week to launch your product. We've got that thing locked out for the next 8 weeks because we're doing some reliability testing or whatever, right? It's like, holy smokes. So that level of leading across at the director level is absolutely crucial.
I love that you shared this, because I think what I've heard in the past is people to say, well, we've got everything ready. We've got it all ready to go, but finance and IT are in the way. It's their fault that we can't move this project forward. And so there's always this, like, we're the victim.
The business prevention units, finance and IT.
Right.
Which is unfair, but if you do it right, they're not the business prevention units.
No. Like if they're involved them early, one, they're grateful. Two, they can actually tell you, because every business I find has, like, especially large organizations, they have systems and policies and procedures about the way things are going to get done. But if you have relationships with the people that work in those different divisions, they're like, yeah, I mean, sure, that's the way we're supposed to do it. But the other way you can do it, which is still okay, is we just have to do this little workaround. If you have a relationship with them, they're absolutely willing to help you figure out how to pull that off. And I've seen great leaders who build relationships, to your point, across the organization, who have this ability to get things done that no one else can get done. And they can't figure out why. And it's because they're not having to get stuck and bogged down in bureaucracy, because they're friends, or at least they have good relationships with people from the different divisions that they used to see as a roadblock, and now they see as their allies.
Yeah, 100%. The relationships are so key. Another piece that's important is companies these days are getting more sophisticated, I would say, at goal setting and planning and road mapping. So if you've got like your HR tech team is going to have a technology roadmap, for example, it's going to be built out, right, for the foreseeable future. Companies or teams have OKRs, objectives and key results, or whatever goal setting approach they use. The more you can get on somebody's OKR list, okay, can I get on your Q2 OKR for this thing, or can I get on that technology roadmap for this other thing? The more effective you're going to be, for sure, in addition to that relationship.
And so how are you finding moving from Dropbox into GM, which is a global company, so the people that you work with, are spread out everywhere? How are you finding the process of building out relationships? Because as we're talking about it, like, you're literally in that phase right now of being a leader in a significant organization who needs to get a lot done, who has a giant responsibility for leadership development and learning globally. The influence that you need to be able to ensure that learning is getting to the right people at the right time, that you've got support of the various business units for the types of programs that you're rolling out. Like, how are you navigating building all these relationships?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one that it's frankly was daunting when I first got to GM. We've got 60,000 roughly salaried employees. I think more than double that if you account the hourly workers. And it's a large organization, mostly centered in Detroit, but it's spread out across different plants. And we've got a West Coast presence now, and Mountain View, California, with software and services, other locations as well, and then globally. So it's a big company. Really, I've got to focus on the HR leadership is where I first and foremost sort of getting my strategy established and bought in. And then also attending some of the live workshops that we're delivering to some of the senior leaders, so that I can build relationships with some of those senior leaders and get to know kind of the who's who and some of the key different groups that are, driving the change in the company and responsible for some of the most critical outcomes. It's just a week by week, month by month, getting out to Detroit as much as I can process. And luckily for me, there's a lot of hunger in the company for learning. It hasn't been a focus, frankly, of the company on a consistent basis, where they've really invested in it on a regular basis over time. So there are gaps to fill that people are very happy to have me come in and fill. So on one hand, I need to go out and build those relationships. On the other hand, I'm not really, luckily, knock on wood, hitting major obstacles in terms of buy-in and so forth, because there's a hunger for it. So it's like I can just got to build.
Right. And so when you look forward, so as you're building these relationships and you think about the future of learning at GM, like, what are the topics that are top of mind for you as you're getting a chance to meet these leaders and hear about what the opportunities and challenges that they're facing? What are the kind of things that you're hearing or you're experiencing that they need to be learning to be successful as a leader of the future?
Well, leading change, like we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
is one of the top ones, and an area that we're focusing on and has been embraced quite a bit. There are topics like we've just launched a new set. They're not new. It's like an evolved set of behaviors at the company, and they are speak fearlessly is one that the company is focused on. I think there are folks who are happy to speak fearlessly. There are other folks that are learning how to sort of frame their message in a way. It just depends. It's a common leadership skill, right? To learn how to story tell and use narrative in how you're influencing, for example. So those are some other examples. Communication skills across the board are in demand. So, and then manager effectiveness. So I like to think of one of the shifts that we're looking to make is thinking about having leaders think of themselves as people developers. So instead of like, I need to manage performance every year, which no leader really loves, like the performance review cycle,
Yeah.
even though when done well, it helps a leader really focus their team and drive performance and outcomes. Right. But it can be an onerous process. But instead of thinking about, the process, let's think about continuous feedback, ongoing coaching, and thinking about yourself as a people developer.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that necessarily comes naturally to every leader, I've found. So we're providing, opportunities to practice feedback and even testing out a newer, there's a company called Ability that does AI simulations.
Right.
It's a Gen AI simulation where you're in a conversation and you can practice in a super safe environment. And, it's intriguing to see what AI can do in the space. So those are a few different topics that we're focused on, but the manager effectiveness and really getting good at the blocking, tackling, the performance, the feedback, goal setting, and how it all comes together with setting expectations and driving accountability is, an area we're focused on pretty heavily.
I had a executive call me and she said to me, "You know me really well, and I can't figure out what my next step in my career is." And I said, "Well, do you want to stay in the organization you're in?" She's like, "Oh yeah, no, I love it. I love the culture. I love the executive team. Like, it's amazing. I can't figure out what's next for me. I'm thinking about going to do an MBA." I said, "Oh, that's interesting." I said, "You're talking a lot about the boat, and I want to talk about the tide." And she's like, "Okay, what's the tide?" I'm like, "Tell me about your team." And there was a pause, and she's like, "I hadn't even thought of that." I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, I think you could do an MBA if you want, but you're already on the executive team of a significant organization that's growing very quickly, and you're very well respected. I don't really think you need the letters or to put the next 2 years into this. And I think if you put a considerably smaller amount of time into developing the people that report to you, you're going to raise the tide, and that will cause your boat to float higher. I think it's a much better investment of your time and energy." And I think as leaders, everyone's thinking about, well, how am I showing up as a leader? It's like, well, actually, how are the people that are reporting to you showing up as leaders? Because your job is to grow them. That's actually the fundamental job, is that you should have a series of A players, some of which could actually take your job one day from a succession planning perspective. That's actually how we're measuring your success, differently than how we measured your success to get the job in the first place.
Yeah, I think this is a really exciting frontier, really, of how we think about organizations. I mean, the team isn't a new concept, but most organizations are still measuring performance individually.
Right.
Most organizations are still doing development individually. I mean, we've got cohort programs and more maybe group coaching, let's say, but still a lot of the development plans, let's say for successors, are individual. But you're absolutely right. The work is done through the team, and the leader should, set a vision and a strategy, and drive for results while fostering, a safe, inclusive teams and developing the team. In Dropbox, we started experimenting with developing our own team effectiveness assessment, and wanted to look at, we love the 5 dysfunctions and some of the other pieces out there, but we wanted to really look at this company, what's different about teams, and started studying that. And one thing that emerged was smart risk taking.
Yeah.
Was an area of opportunity, and not one that we'd seen in some of the other models out there. And so it was kind of this connection to innovation. It was really interesting. And we even had started talking before I left about, should we look at measuring teams and even doing team performance in the way that we do individual performance ratings? And there was some initial traction to that idea. So I think that's why I call it kind of a frontier. I'm not really seeing that much formally at that level yet.
I appreciate you highlighting that difference in looking at the success of a leader individually and moving towards looking at the success of the output of that team and what results they're creating, because it really isn't, if you look at a leader and like, I did it all, it's like, well, then you're not really a leader, right? Like a leader would be, right? Like they're driving and helping to support a team with clear goals, direction, and support, removing roadblocks, giving them the develop they need so that the organization can create the results that they're getting. I've really appreciated you making time to be on the podcast today, Justin. Like, when we first met when you were at Dropbox, and I knew we were kindred souls around leadership. And then, hearing as you moved into GM, your thoughts around it, I'm like, I got to have you on the podcast so we can have this conversation. So thank you again for making the time to be here today.
You bet, Mike. Yeah, I always appreciate your perspectives and enjoy the conversation. So thanks for having me.